Another very popular clash that you see is, should the government do something? Just something. In many economics debate, these are usually very polarizing, very controversial policies. So the very common ones that you see are things like breaking up monopolies, price control, abolishing patents. These are usually the ones that are the most popular, the ones that are most talked about by like things. Or it could also be like what the most popular one recently is like the global wealth tax. These are things that governments can do, but they are not doing them yet because there are certain things that you have to analyze in these debates. So in a lot of these debates, you have to just ask yourself a few questions. I thought this looked cool initially. Turns out it doesn't really look super cool. The first one is that you just follow the classic debate stuff. So what is the problem that's being identified here? Does this policy actually solve the problem? And if it does, are there any unintended side effects? So let's look at two examples. The first one is on breaking up monopolies. Monopolies are like non-elastic goods. They become price makers. They jack up prices as high as they can. This is price gouging. The best example is EpiPen. So EpiPen prices were significantly more expensive in like the US compared to any other places because corporations were able to like hijack the patent to be able to create the EpiPen to inject insulin, and that led to the price being jacked up. When you break them up, they no longer capture the market as they are smaller, as the smaller parts will have to compete against one another. So obviously they can no longer like price gouge and make sure that these things are unaffordable, thereby harming a lot of the welfare of individuals that depend upon these non-elastic goods in order for them to continue on living. So these can be things like your medicine, can also be things like your energy or whatnot. So intuitively, this is pretty good for welfare, but this also does slow down growth and efficiency because you have things like duplicate research, you have no economies of scale, and it's like you have less financial capital to be able to conduct like research and development, because you feel like, well, if I don't have a lot of money, I'd rather use that money in things that are safer compared to things that are a lot riskier because I no longer have the reserves to be able to cushion my risk in the event that it fails. But this can also be things like price control. So price control is obvious, like morally very intuitive. The companies hacking up prices during times of crisis is very unethical and they should be dealt with. But realistically, companies, if they don't see a profit, will just stop manufacturing it. Like Venezuela's price control just led to a lot of empty shelves on the market because there was price cap on things like wheat and like milk and like cereal. The rent cap in Germany also just led to a lot of landlords converting their rented apartments to like luxury condominiums for the rich, unless like the condition of the apartments deteriorate, and they don't want that. So what they did is, rather than letting it be a rent thing, we just let people buy them, which is just a lot more expensive. And if you want to buy them, you might as well just like let the rich pay for luxury condominiums and luxury apartments in the first place. Yeah. So in both of these instances, you can see that these are things that intuitively do harm welfare. Like monopolies are not good for welfare. Um, price control. Price gouging is also just not very good for welfare. But these are also things that are very important for the economy in order for the economy to function normally. So maybe there is a short-term harm that exists in either of this, but there can be arguments and analysis to either prove that the long-term economic growth is something that does trickle down and it leads to an increased welfare. But there can also be argument to argue that this doesn't lead to an increase in welfare. In fact, this is just going to lead to companies and conglomerates diversifying and entrenching their influence across politics, and that's something that's a lot worse also. So another thing that we can also just look about is just how much has the economy changed. And I think the economy has changed in three primary factors. The first one is just in terms of automation. This is by far the most noticeable one. So various corporations right now have already automated large chunk of their manufacturing lines. So this is back then associated with machines. So like machines that just beep bop and like just take stuff, put it in another one. So there's a particular algorithm associated with it already. With the advent of AI, this might also just lead to them penetrating into industries that were considered to be more human. So I think the best example of this is in terms of, I think, the law industry here in Malaysia, where people have concern that AI is going to replace them because they can just make arguments far more persuasive, they're able to draw upon legal precedent, they're able to do these things far more efficiently and far more persuasively compared to like your average like up and coming lawyer, for instance. The second one is integration. So post the collapse of the USSR, the world has been trending towards economic globalization, like the removal of tariffs and the creation of multilateral economic organization. And I want to note, and I want to just pause here and say that yes, it is true that Trump has been a bit more protectionist and has been a bit more isolationist, and it seems like some economies are gearing upon being a bit more protectionist, like India, for instance. But it doesn't mean that the trend up until this point has not been economic liberalization, like the creation of Mercosur, the creation of the G7, the creation of the G20, and a bunch of other like economic organizations are often created for the promotion of things like free trade between a lot of these regions and whatnot, like free movement of trade, free movement of labor in these areas. So what is true that Trump has been implementing tariffs and whatnot, a lot of economies has centered themselves around economic globalization as a priority in order for them to be able to get a like huge chunk of money in order to invest within the economy in the economy. The last one is the sustainability. So corporations now care a lot more about sustainability in the green economy, which is why we have things like the green patterns, solar panels, electric cars. Um, Part of this is motivated by the fact that this is a very lucrative industry. Like a lot of people view this industry to be the next big thing. But also partially this also because of the increasing depletion of resources and people seeing things like oil becoming a lot more volatile. So they want to find things that are less dependent on like natural resources that are only found in like a particular part of the world and try to find something that is just generally universally applicable. So things like solar panels are like a lot more equal in the sense that the sun kind of shines everywhere. And electric cars and whatnot also where you can just create electricity without it having to be done via things like natural gas or without it having to be done through things like oil or like fossil fuel. So like these are the three main things I think in the sense of where the economies have changed. You can look at the next part also. So we're talking about bubbles, and these are not the fun kind of bubbles, right? So the main way in which bubbles form are through this particular like mechanism. So the first is that something drastic happened within the market. So the creation of AI, the internet within the 20s and whatnot. So as a result of this, people were like, wow, there was significant investment. The media capitalized upon it. You get more and more investors. Then people think, whoa, if I buy it now and I sell it later at a higher price, I profit out of it. So people keep on buying more. So it's not just people buying more, but a lot more people buying more in the process because they believe that I can just sell it away. The bubble pops, the value drops, people go into debt, people have to sell parts of their assets in order for them to be able to like recuperate back their losses. The earliest example of this are tulips. So tulips in the Netherlands went from a luxury item to practically being worthless in the span of a few days. Real estate prices collapsed during the great financial crisis. People went into debt, or when AI starts being profitable, which is I think what people are kind of predicting already, which is that when sentience is either discovered or when people realize that the AI bubble is a bubble, it will pop and then people gradually will suffer the financial repercussion of the bubble popping.